via phone is noted Georgia attorney Lynn Wood. Lynn says the day of reckoning is coming. Lynn, great to have you back, sir.
Well, thank you for having me back, John. Where are you today?
I'm in Alpharetta, Georgia today, Lynn.
Alpharetta, Georgia is a great city just up from where I used to live in Roswell, Sandy Springs, Georgia.
Oh, yeah. And, of course, I was at the rally you did, and what was that? But time is going by. I was at like 3 weeks ago. Remember you had that massive rally? I mean, that thing was – that was like –
It seems like we voted 4 years ago.
Eugene from Chesterfield says, ask Lynn Wood, is he going to vote in the January 5th runoff? Great question. I'm going to start there.
The answer is I will likely vote if there is a January 5 runoff. And the reason, and the only reason I would vote is because I'm getting ready to file another lawsuit in Georgia with respect to the runoff election, where I will be seeking an emergency injunction staying that election because of the clear potential and reality of fraud occurring again. So the only reason I would vote is if I needed to perfect my claim that in the runoff, once again, I've been subjected to fraud, my vote has been diluted, and my equal protection rights under the 14th Amendment have been violated. They're getting ready to do to us again what they did November the 3rd. So, in fact, watching things, it's almost worse this time because they're using people coming in from out of town.
Yes.
They've got a larger number of absentee ballot alleged requests now than they had for the November 3rd general election. That's nonsense.
Thank you. I just got to say this, Lynn. Thank you for saying that. I've been saying this now for 2 weeks. The fraud that you're going to see on January 5th is going to dwarf November 3rd. They've added another 20 drop boxes. If you go to GeorgiaStarNews.com, I got 4 stories up there. There's no chain of custody, 78%, no chain of custody. You can't get a FOIA back from these people. They won't give it to you. They've added 20 drop boxes. We got 1.3 million mail-in votes in November 3rd. They expect 1.5 million on January 5th. So that went up 10%, 15%. And then they registered 80,000 people in 3 weeks. How do you register 80,000 people in 3 weeks? I mean, that takes millions and millions of dollars. And how do you even find them? It's been 3 weeks. They register 80,000 new voters who didn't vote on November 3rd? Lynn, are you kidding me?
And they're ignoring the Georgia Constitution, which states very clearly that if an individual did not vote in the general election, they cannot vote in the runoff. They're blatantly ignoring that rule, that statutory constitutional rule in Georgia. So the question is, would I otherwise vote absent the lawsuit and the possible need to do so to perfect it? The answer is unequivocally no. I would not vote, knowingly vote in a fraudulent election, and that's what's going to happen on January 5th if that runoff occurs. There's still litigation pending in the United States Supreme Court that I believe, if properly decided, under clear precedent, would stop that January 5 runoff because it should declare and hold that the November 3rd election in Georgia was unlawful and unconstitutional. Our Supreme Court needs to act. Our country is in a constitutional crisis, I believe, of unparalleled magnitude. And it's time for the highest court in our land to weigh in. No court, John, has even addressed the massive evidence of fraud, evidence that mounts daily. And I'm not talking about some evidence. I'm talking about almost an overwhelming amount of evidence from different voters and different information we've received, videos, sworn affidavits. It's mind-boggling how obvious the fraud was on November the 3rd. Mm-hmm. And the fact that no lower court, these judges in Atlanta ought to be ashamed of themselves. Mm-hmm. Even if they don't think the law is in our favor, they should judicially note their own personal judicial concern for the massive admissible evidence of fraud in this election. why are they silent? I think they're scared. I think they've been threatened. Or I think they're ideologically aligned with the change that is being sought in our system of government. I've said for months this was not about an election. This was what I called a color revolution, where we are in the middle of a battle, soon to be a war, with communist China and the globalists to try to take away our freedoms and to overturn our constitutional rights. I don't know if America has woken completely up yet. I'm afraid that 50% of the people out there don't know what's going on because they're still listening to the communist propaganda from the mainstream media.
Well, and also you can't get the word out. I mean, the fake news won't cover it. YouTube censors it. I got a day suspension on Twitter because I reported news as it was happening at the Capitol. Like, I just tweeted out exactly what somebody said, and I get banned. I mean, the censorship is going on here. Linwood, let's get to your lawsuit and then the Sidney's. Your lawsuit that you originally filed, status of that, where is that?
We have a petition for writ of certiorari before the United States Supreme Court. Mm-hmm. We also have filed with the court a motion for an emergency briefing for the case to be handled on an expedited emergency basis. Mm-hmm. That case is just sitting on the docket. We've not heard anything from the Supreme Court. Now, there's also pending a Pennsylvania case that I believe should be decided in the same fashion. That the Pennsylvania election should be held to be unlawful and unconstitutional for essentially the same reasons as my case. Mm-hmm. I'll point out that what Texas did when it filed its multi-state case before the Supreme Court, where the Supreme Court felt that it did not have standing as a state to sue other states for their election illegalities, they raised the same exact issue with respect to the Georgia election that I raised. So, the media, quote-unquote, mainstream media, I call them propaganda tool of the Communist Party, they reported that as if the president and the state of Texas lost. They didn't lose on the merits. The merits were not addressed by the Supreme Court. Mm-hmm. They said it was an issue of standing, whether Texas could do what they sought to do initially in the Supreme Court. So, no court has ruled on the merits of the claims of fraud or the claims with respect to the illegality of the election itself because of the unconstitutional nature in which the procedures were developed.
What's this difference between your suit that you just explained, and thank you for that, and you're right, no court has ruled on the merits, just the standing issue, and they kicked it out. What's the difference between your suit and Sidney's suit, which she's got now, what, all 4 states are on the docket? How's that work, Linwood?
She's got those cases docketed in the Supreme Court, also seeking a writ of mandamus to resolve issues on the merits. The difference between Sidney's case, which I've helped her with, and she's a remarkable person, by the way. She works about 30 hours a day.
Yes.
Her case focuses on the fraud in the voting machines, where the numbers were flipped, a computer algorithm was installed, basically to give 2/3 of a vote to Biden and 1/3 of a vote to President Trump. And there's hard evidence it occurred in Georgia in Ware County. There's no doubt that it occurred. Here's something, and her case focuses on the fraud in the machines, whereas my case focuses on the unlawful nature of the mail-in absentee ballots. But everybody seems to be saying to us, the courts, that we're untimely. We waited too long. I want to point out something that is critically important. In October of 2020, October the 11th, in a 140-some page order, Federal Judge Amy Totenberg had addressed at length the Dominion voting machines. A group of Democrats filed a lawsuit against the Secretary of State, essentially contending the machines were subject to fraud. I guess the Democrats thought the Republicans were going to cheat. But within a month of the election, Judge Totenberg, after several days of hearings with experts, concluded that there was a list of ways in which the Dominion machine was subject to being manipulated for fraud. Mm-hmm. But she held that she couldn't rule on it because no election had occurred, to see if the fraud actually would in fact occur. Within a month, the election was held. The fraud occurred. The machine was manipulated exactly the way Totenberg had felt that it could be. And then within 3 weeks, Sidney Powell and I filed a lawsuit on that fraud in the machines. And the federal judge says, you're too late. You should have filed sooner. Well, wait a minute. The federal judge said, it's too early. Within a month, it's too early until there's an election. Then the federal judge says, you're too late. Well, you can't be too early and too late at the same time. That's errant nonsense. Right. Something's going on in the court system, just like something's going on in the state capitol in Georgia. I'll note, and you may have seen it, where I tweeted the other night that I thought that Brian Kemp and Brad Rafensberger were going to jail.
Yes, sir.
The next morning, the President of the United States retweeted my tweet. He didn't comment on it, but I think it speaks volumes. If I were Brian Kemp and Brad Rafensberger, I'd be getting my bags packed to go to the federal penitentiary. They forgot about the executive order that the president had in place 2 years ago, September 2018. I think Brad Rafensberger and Brian Kemp conspired with and worked with a foreign government to interfere in our national election. In my view, they are traitors. Their name should be changed to Benedict Arnold. The people of Georgia are furious. They are madder by the day. If those two people, along with Jeff Duncan, the lieutenant governor, who is a joke, been on CNN more than he's spoken to the people of this state.
Cosmo man.
And Chris, pretty boy. Chris Carr, the Attorney General. I don't think we're going to have anybody in our state capitol in a few days. We may have to have it seriously. I believe the president's going to have to impose martial law in the state of Georgia to have the military come here and operate the government until they can set up and hold a honest election so that Georgia can elect honestly a legitimate governor. So the matter is much more serious than the mainstream media discusses. In fact, it's almost diametrically opposed to their propaganda. But sadly, about half the people in Georgia probably still don't realize about what's getting ready to happen because they've been misled by the media.
What is to stop the Supreme Court from kicking your suit out, not dealing with it, and kicking Sidney's out? And if they do that, then you have nowhere else to go. Even though they won't hear the merits of it, they should take it up, Linwood. But what happens if they just say, well, we're just not going to deal with this? I mean, can they do that? Can they just decide they're not going to deal with it?
They're the Supreme Court of the United States of America. They can do whatever they want to do or not do. But here's what I will tell you straight up, John.
Okay.
If the Supreme Court does not act, then they're going to turn over the election to the streets. I think they're afraid to act because they know that if they follow the law and nullify the elections in several states, the matter is going to result in violence in the streets. So if you follow me, you're going to have violence in the streets either way. So I would suggest strongly that the United States Supreme Court has taken an oath to follow the law. They need to enforce the law. We are a country based on the rule of law. If there's going to be violence in the streets, let it be because we enforce the rule of law. Do not let it be violence in the streets because we are engaging in lawlessness. The violence in the streets sounds like some sort of act of trying to incite violence. That's not true. Please don't allow anybody to misunderstand what I'm saying.
Of course.
I have said I thought this was a color revolution. A color revolution has as an essential ingredient, a factor, that you create a disputed election. You drive sides further apart. And then you have violence in the streets. It's planned. It's not just the result of the court. It's been planned. It's been planned for some time now. This country was attacked by communist China with the COVID-19 virus. That was a biological weapon. You could list the number of ways that it has been used by China to disrupt and alter and change the United States of America. Then China was involved in the violence that occurred in the rioting based on alleged systemic racism, the efforts to delegitimize law enforcement. Then China attacked us when they used their machines. Let's talk about it. Dominion is 75% financed and owned by the Communist Party of China. Then they attacked us in our election. We are, in my view, we are in a war with China because they've been attacked at least twice. And I think we're going to be attacked in Georgia again when they interfere with and create another fraudulent election on January the 5th. Our country has been asleep at the switch, John. Over the last 2 or 3 decades, communists have infiltrated our country at the local, state, and federal level in our government, our judiciary, and our businesses. They have infected our way of life in America, in academics and in the media. That's exactly what they do. Look at their playbook. It's a color revolution playbook developed by the CIA that we've used on other countries. And now the communists are using that same playbook to create a revolution and overthrow of our government. America's got to wake up. Luckily, I believe, there's no luck in my mind. There are no coincidences. We have a president of the United States that knows communism. His lawyer for years was Roy Cohen, who used to be the lawyer for Joe McCarthy back in the 50s. So I believe President Trump knows communism. I think he knew they were going to do this. That's why he passed the executive order in 2018. I firmly believe that he caught them red-handed. I believe that our government watched that election and knew the illegality was occurring because they monitor the Internet. Every bit of information that you put into the airwaves is tracked by the Department of National Information. So the DNI has it. I believe other governments, such as Israel, has it. So I think there's certain people in this country that know exactly what happened. Sidney and I have been developing the evidence to present to the American public so that when the president has to act, people should not be surprised. But I don't believe that Donald Trump is going to walk away from an election that he knows he won by a landslide, which he knows was interfered with by communist China and other foreign actors, and allow this country to go into communism and tyranny. Donald Trump loves the people, but he loves freedom and he loves America.
All right, Lynn, I've got one phone call. I'm going to take one. We're going to go to Caroline in Sandy Springs. Caroline, you're on with Lynn Wood. Go ahead.
Hi, Lynn. I have 2 questions for you. The first one being, can the Georgia voters or Fulton County voters or another county in Georgia sue Fulton County for dumping potentially 20,000 ballots into the system? Can they sue for equal protection, those ballots that were pulled out from underneath the table in the State Farm Arena? What grounds do we have as Georgia citizens?
You have the same grounds that I have in the lawsuit that I filed as a Georgia voter in person. Your vote has been diluted, and you have been denied equal protection of the law. I believe any individual voter in Georgia clearly has standing because of the violation of your constitutional right. We have forgotten, when we talk about free speech and freedom of religion, and all the other rights that we cherish so much in our country, we've kind of forgotten over the years that one of the most valuable, if not the most valuable, is the right to vote. Americans have the power to determine who runs the government. That power is exercised through the power to vote. If our vote is tainted by fraud, you have stripped the American citizens of their right to select their leader. And then you have sold your leadership of this country to the highest bidder, who's ever got enough money to go out and buy, in effect, this fraudulent vote system will run your country. I don't believe when people wake up in America and realize what's happening and what happened on November 3rd that they're going to tolerate it. While we may have what appears to be a civil war where we're fighting between ourselves, I think we're going to very quickly learn that this country faces a common foe. And when we realize that, I believe this country will unite as it always has done in the past. And we will fight that common foe, and we will defeat that common foe, because Americans have a spirit of freedom that we're not going to ever let someone take away from us without a fight. And when we fight for freedom, America always wins, always wins. China needs to remember that.
Well, Lynn, you've been a warrior in this, and I'm running out of time here, and I want to thank Carolyn for her call from Sandy Springs. Linwood, final questions very quickly. Your assessment, is the Supreme Court going to take up your case? Are they going to take up Sydney's case so we can finally get the evidence out? In your judgment, are they going to do that?
I can only say that with respect to my case, which I've studied in detail, there's no doubt in my mind that the Supreme Court should take my case. Mm-hmm. It's properly postured. Mm-hmm. It raises an issue that must be addressed. Mm-hmm. I think procedurally, Sydney's cases are on good grounds too. Mm-hmm. So the answer is yes, they definitely should take the cases. They have an obligation legally and morally to resolve this issue for the American citizens. Mm-hmm. They're the 9 justices of the Supreme Court of the United States. They need to have the courage to act. Mm-hmm. They need to have the courage to enforce the rule of law. Mm-hmm. I don't know if they've been threatened. I don't know if some member or more has ideological problems or is some way compromised. I have some concerns about Justice Roberts. But the bottom line is the Supreme Court is not, if they're not going to act, then there's only one person that can act, the person that is absolutely sworn to uphold and faithfully execute the laws of this country. That's the head of the executive branch. That's the President of the United States. That's Donald J. Trump. He's a man of courage. He loves this country. He loves freedom. He loves the people. And he will act, just like Abraham Lincoln was forced to do. He had to impose martial law to save this country back in the 1860s. Trump will do what he has to do to save this country.
All right, I got to take off. I want to thank Lynn Wood for being with us.